I don't think about it. I just stay right in the moment. I trust my preparation and the preparation of the people around me, and then just try to find moments to enjoy it. So, I mean, I used to, in warm-up, I'd go up in the stands and eat popcorn and just enjoy myself until women's hockey started to get a little bit more televised, and some of the media guys are like, hey, you can't be stuffing your face with popcorn up in the stands when we're trying to film you during a warm-up, you know, things like that. Just going out on the bench at Vancouver Olympics, I would, you know, get my talk done when there was about 8 minutes left on the clock, and I'd just go stand on the bench for 2 or 3 minutes and just enjoy it and look around. And you know, we always told our players too in warm up, like, get that out of your way, like, find where your parents are sitting, find where your friends are sitting, know the rink, be comfortable with it, so when you step on the ice for puck drop, you know what's going on. So, you know, that, don't get too far ahead of yourself. Like, the what ifs will kill you. Like, it just devastate you if you worry, you know, what if this happens, what if that happens. But there's scenario planning too. You know, that warm-up time when I would sit in the stands, or even, you know, whatever I did after I couldn't sit in the stands and stuff my face with popcorn, you know, I'd be like, okay, there's 5 seconds left, you know, what face-off, what side, like, I'd visualize the rink, all of those types of things. I think visualization is a big piece for me. Like, if I'm speaking somewhere, you know, massive, which is really important, you know, I need to see what the room looks like. I got to have a bit of a focal point so I understand. But for whatever reason, I've always been real good at staying in the moment and just centering myself that way. Well, I think people step up all the time. I really do believe that. It's catching them doing it and recognizing those moments with them. You know, whether it's a player who does something that nobody else sees and you're able to slide that in, not to single them out. And I think, you know, in gender, sometimes that's tough. Women don't like to be singled out as much. Guys like to puff their chests out a bit more, so you get a little bit better response on that. But I think just keep catching people in the moment. And, you know, we had a call this morning about mental wellness, and we were talking about that. And we said the saying that, you know, the value of a moment doesn't come into play until years later. And being able to find those moments as a leader and take responsibility. You know, the one piece that really I believe overwhelms people in leadership roles is that it's lonely. Like, it can be really lonely to make decisions and then have to live by them. And sometimes I believe that people not involved or that get the final decision underestimate the amount of work and time and agonizing even that leaders put into decisions, and they just don't pull it out of a hat. And at times it's pretty lonely. We don't do a good job in society of walking in somebody else's shoes and seeing things from their viewpoint. Well, you really got to find what motivates them. Like, why are they there? And, you know, so that's one motivation. How do they learn? You know, what do they need there to help them be better? And then where are they going to fit in? Like, it's easier as an individual in an individual sport. Like, you know, if I'm coaching a swimmer and they're really there for the activity, to be comfortable in the water and to be around their teammates and just soak all in a swim meet, you know, that's a different way of coaching than if it's a swimmer who wants to win gold medals at a provincial championship and advance on. You know, and then you talk about team sports, and now you've got 20, 30 personalities, depending on how many are on your team and what sport you're in. But it's what role will they bring? How can you get their teammates to value them? Because generally coaches value every player. It's their teammates that they really want the value from. And, you know, I remember a young girl who could not hit a ball. Like, she just could not hit a ball. And she was on my team every year, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with her. And she loved it, and every year I was like, maybe she won't sign up this year. And she came back. But eventually what happened was she could run like the wind. You know, so we taught her how to bunt. And she could bunt and get on, and then she could steal. And, you know, we could win games just from that role that she had. And then over time, her confidence grew, and, you know, she got better and she could hit the ball, and then became a better ball player that way. But, you know, motivation, number one. How do they learn? Number two. and then how can you help them be valued by the team or by their teammates, and eventually it'll fall into place. But you got to invest in it. You got to spend time. It's a great one. You know, in my early years, you didn't have anybody around you, so you learned to do everything. You were the bottle washer, the skate sharpener, the, you know, whatever it might be in terms of setting up the ball diamonds and that. So I would say it was a weakness of mine real early in my career, because I didn't have people I could delegate to and grow with. And I find a lot of coaches in my generation, you know, I've struggled with that over the years in terms of trusting and delegating, because you never had to do it. But I would say on one piece that I always loved doing was teaching or working with my players in responsibility and accountability. And a great example I have in Oyen, there where I grew up, is there was no girls ball or girls fastball or softball when I grew up, and so I started playing ladies ball when I was in grade 6. And when my younger sister started playing, my mom voluntold me to coach the team, and I took that group for a long time. But we had no girls ball in the town. And so what we did was we took that team, and I took them in groups of 3, and we started a 7 and under team and a 9 and under team and an 11 and under team. And so we would practice twice a week, and we would spend Mondays practice planning for all the teams they were going to coach. And then we would pick the honoriest parent to be the team manager, and the team manager's job was to protect those young girls, and they all coached. And you know, I miss that now, getting involved with that. We ran a hockey school, and same thing, we had all the junior leaders, and kids would come to the hockey school till they were 14, and then they become a junior leader, and you know, that morphed into they needed prep camp at night so they could skate, but it, you know, you really get moments there to work with them and teach them in those settings, and it just builds over time. So I think those pieces are real important for us to do, and I could be better and am better at delegating and using staff more. Well, that's most of my career, so I think sometimes naivety helps. You know, you don't know you're not supposed to be there, or you're not supposed to be around it. I mean, it is tough, but naivety is a big thing. Like, if nobody tells you that you're not supposed to be there, or that somebody isn't liking what you're doing, I think those are the tough things. Honesty, I always believe, is important. Like, to kind of hit it right in the head. Like, you got a problem with me, or you know, here's what I'm hearing. What do you think, or where are we at here, or what's the problem? Lots of times I've always felt too, consistency of behavior. You know, let your actions do the talking over time. And you know, nowadays we might not have the patience to wait for that, I guess. You know, I don't want to sound like my parents, but I guess I do. You know, we want it now, and the patience of that all takes time. But that's a really tough one. Like, you need to know who's got your back and who doesn't. And sometimes it's just a matter of your consistency of your behaviors will work it through. I like to think karma happens, you know, eventually for people. But you know, those things are tough. I would add into that with social media and everything that happens, is that you've got to balance that out and understand the perspective around that, versus getting caught up. I've had a lot of coaches that, you know, as soon as a game's over, they're looking on Twitter, or they're reading, you know. And I mean, when I coached in major competitions, I never read any media. I never looked at any of it. I didn't care. I didn't care what people were saying. I had a plan. I had a thought process, and it was only the people in that room that were important to me in terms of how it went. But it's not easy, that's for sure, and it goes back to resilience, and it goes back to, you know, knowing yourself and being comfortable with that. Well, number one, knowing yourself is crucial. You've got to know what sets you off and where you're good at and all of that. So whether that's an assessment that you do, or whether it's feedback you get from people, I think that's really, really important. Over time, for me, I really believe it's been experience. I mean, I started coaching when I was 14 years old. You learn a lot over time. And coaching both men and women in numerous sports. So you get a wide range of personalities, of interactions, individual sports, team sports, they're different. So I think those pieces are real important. taking the best out of people, like leaders that you have, whether it's school sports where you played, in the community, it's not, business leaders, all of those things. Like I've always sort of just sat back, and everybody's always asked me, like, do you have a role model or a mentor? And I never really had one. What I always tried to do was like take the best out of people I met and make sure things that irritated me I tried not to do in my own day-to-day. Now with the internet and everything, I mean, there's so many opportunities to access webinars and seminars and learn from people, and the leaders just want to share. And the more you can access and ask those questions and not be afraid to ask the questions, the more opportunities you'll get. And I'll just share one last story. I remember being in a social setting with Claire Drake from the University of Alberta and a few other guys, and I was watching them, and it seemed like there was a group of them that would have coached together for years, and they were enjoying themselves, and people just came up and interrupted them and asked questions, and they answered them, and they didn't miss a beat, and they didn't look irritated or upset that people were sort of interrupting them. And I asked Coach Drake afterwards, like, it seemed like you guys were having a lot of fun. Like, didn't that bother you that you couldn't just talk with the guys that you wanted to talk with? And he looked at me, and he was almost with a look of disgust. He was like, if you're a leader, like, you got to expect that, and you got to share. And if people are courageous enough to ask you questions, you got to give them your time. So that was a really good lesson for me at that point. Well, there's a few things there. As a female in an all-male sport, it was pretty lonely, and you had to have thick skin. So, the very first thing you have to develop is thick skin. And that goes back to, leadership is lonely, and you're not trying to make friends, you're trying to make good decisions in the best interest of your program or your team, or, those types of things. I think that's important. It's important to understand that when you work with a team or work with a group, that things aren't equal, they're fair, and teaching your people to understand that it might not be equal, but it'll be fair, is really important. So they understand better when you make a decision, and maybe in their minds it wasn't made in their best interest as one person. So I think those pieces are real important. I would say the biggest challenge right now as leaders move from sport right into coaching, and there's more of that happening maybe than what it used to be, is you want to earn respect, not being liked. And I had one colleague call it, you want to be, it's fine to be friendly, but you're not friends. And working through all that and understanding that, and not, goes back to knowing yourself and being comfortable in your own skin so that you can deal with that. The resilience piece is really, it's really about failing and succeeding. You're going to make more decisions and more things where you fail, you lose a game, or it doesn't work out the way you want it to work out, than you will where you walk away feeling successful. And that, builds resilience, because you go back and okay, I'm going to revamp that, I'm going to take it through. But I mean, if I had to give three main pieces, it would certainly be, you got to have a thick skin. You got to understand that leadership is lonely, and that if you have been given the responsibility, and if parents have trusted you with their children, then you have to make good decisions for everybody as best you can. It's always fairness, not necessarily being equal, and people understanding that. And then if you're in the business to be liked as a leader, then you better find something else to do. It's about trying to set that respect and consistency so that you maintain a relationship for years to come.
During your career?
Well, good and bad. I mean, I just had this conversation with a coach the other day. Like, when I coached minor hockey and young kids hockey, like, I never won. Like, I got lots of silver medals. I lost. I remember losing with the same team, overtime, double overtime, triple overtime, and quadruple overtime. Like, we never advanced to the Western Canadians. And then my first appointment as a national team coach, 2000, we're in, I think it was Kitchener or Mississauga, and we're down 2-0 going into the third. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, here we go again, And we tied it up. We go to overtime, and I'm still kind of in my mind, here we go again, But we won. And it's really about the process. Like, it's about believing in your prep and believing in what you bring. And again, not getting distracted outside of that. Like I remember that game like it was yesterday. Like we had set lines for quite a while, and I had always coached where I changed lines regularly. And we got in that third period and we're down 2-0, and just on a whim I changed up a winger. And that same winger scored 2 of the 3 goals for us to win, you know, just on the change there. So, you know, you really have to trust yourself. I mean, failure's a part of all of it. It's perspective, and it's never the end of the world, especially in coaching. Like, it might be the end of your job and you go on to someplace else. And, you know, I remember we lost the first World Championships. We never gave up a goal against. The goals against in regulation time were 0.00. And we lost in a shootout 1-0. And we lost the gold medal. It was the first time the women's program had ever lost at a world championship. And, you know, I was pretty frustrated. And if you ask Bob Nicholson, I fired myself on TV. And then he was like, what am I supposed to do with that now? I'm not interested in firing you, but you just fired yourself on TV, you know, because I was, you know, I took responsibility if we can't score in a regulation game, you know, and that. But, I mean, failure is just a part of it, and it's about how you work through it. And again, I worry about our youth with participation trophies and, you know, all of those things, and how we help our next generation and our tomorrow's society work through the fact that failure is okay. Like, it's good. It's, you know, if I mean, unless you're a surgeon in that final moment. But other than that, you work through it, you learn from it, pick yourself up the next day, dust yourself off, and go back to work. But you know, in the end, I'm kind of rambling, but in the end, it really is about your process. Even if you are successful, and I would say you need to look at your process even deeper when you are successful, because that's when luck or something could have happened that got you through something that probably shouldn't have got you through it. But if you go back through your process and look at what you did, the answers will probably always be there. There'll be a moment, or there'll be a situation that maybe you should have handled differently, and that probably affected where you end up at.
I think it's interesting too, though, if you talk about that story, what that would say, I think, to Bob Nicholson is that leaders take responsibility. They don't look at somebody else. They look at themselves first.
Yeah.
Probably shouldn't have done it on TV.
No, it was a bad call.
But what you did was exactly what a leader should do.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
But I always say to my players and staff and everybody, like, you know, I'll always protect you in the public. You might not like what happens privately, how angry I am or consequences, but I'm always going to protect you in the public eye, right?
That's a good leader.
Oh man, there's so many stories, like with players and people. But I think, you know, leadership itself is just about consistency. And I think some of the biggest compliments I've ever gotten, I mean, we always ran a boot camp with our women's program before centralization, or during centralization. And, you know, the players were never very happy with me, ever. And I remember one of them being very, very unhappy. But after she was done yelling at me, she said, "But I just know that you'll never make us do anything you wouldn't do." You know, and so she, you know, those pieces are leadership on their end, like recognizing it and knowing, you know, where it's at. I mean, when you look at the blue line, when we've won, and you look along the blue line at all the players standing there and the anthem playing, every one of them has a story. And every one of its leadership. I remember 2006 Olympics, we only went with 5 defensemen. And, you know, normally you're 6 and 12. We didn't have extra players at that time. And the reason we went with 5 defensemen was that I ran 10 forwards on the power play. You know, our best defensemen were defensive defensemen. And you know, I looked at that point in time. We had 5 games at the Olympics. We, you know, probably would have 2, maybe 3 games that would be physically demanding on our D, and just decided that we were better off to have the extra forward. But, you know, a great example of leadership of that, even though the D said they accepted it, and, you know, whatever the team needs, you know, there was a point in time where they weren't. And I remember Cassie Campbell coming in and sitting down at my desk and saying, Mel, we got to do something with the D. We're gonna have a D week, okay? Like, we're gonna celebrate the D all week. We're gonna get them T-shirts, and we're just gonna celebrate them. But you're gonna have to celebrate them. You're gonna have to present the shirts and really build them up, and then we'll take it from there. And it was, that the D still talk about those moments in those T-shirts. So those are great leadership moments. You look over time with Haley Wickenheiser's career, and the Winnipeg 2007 Worlds, come to mind, where for one of the first times she was a captain, and she scored 2 big goals for us. So it comes in different ways, and it kind of goes back to just you got to recognize when there's leadership, and sometimes it's that simple thing of somebody recognized that somebody needed help in the parking lot, and they went and gave some help to somebody that's not even with our team or part of our program, and just acknowledging that. So I mean, leadership is there every day, whether it's the little kids. I think there's a Cadbury commercial right now. I don't know if you've seen that, where this little guy, there's a girl sitting on the bus and she's kind of crying, and this little guy has a Cadbury chocolate bar, and he offers it to her, right? And that's leadership. Like, he recognized that she was having a bad moment and wanted to share his chocolate bar with her. So, as adults and as leaders, I believe we need to do a better job of acknowledging those moments, because we complain a lot that there's no leadership and there's no accountability, but we don't work very hard to see it and acknowledge it in a small way or a big way.